Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here and introduce my really dear friend, Katie Bagley. I think those who are from Mumbai really need no introduction to her. She's very well known as a writer and raconteur of nature stories for children. And I think if I'm not mistaken, I think she's booked for at least 100 talks and shows each year in Mumbai. And she's everywhere. She's in schools, she's in theaters, nature events, nature clubs, bookshops, you name it. I just like to share my experiences with Katie. And my first encounter with this lady occurred on a BNHS, Bombay Natural History Society nature trip. I think that was a decade and a half ago. And suddenly we found ourselves to be roommates. And it was first time I was laying eyes on this lady with these thick silver hair. And on the first evening, we had a particularly exhausting day, and I was just ready to shut out the lights and hit the sack. And then this gentle lady sheepishly comes to me and asks, would I mind? She needed to sing to her dog Cleo in Mumbai since he would not sleep without her lullaby. You see, she told me, he's never slept a single night without my song. So there I was, listening for a good 4 minutes on a really, really tired day to a sweet voice lulling and kissing her dog 1,000 kilometers away to sleep over the phone. And I've been born and raised in the Parsi colony in Dadar, Mumbai. And so I'm not really much surprised with the quirky ways of the Parsis. But even for me, this was a new treat. But Katie's been so much fun ever since. She is a nature lover and a prolific writer of children's books. I think she has 23 books to her credit. And she illustrates all the books herself. And her talks are suffused with poetry, animation, drama, and stories of nature as she encounters it in her numerous trips which she takes out in the wild. And then she kind of suffuses them with a twist of the human nature interface. And even though the books are meant for ages 5 to 15, or that's what she writes, I found that they work at 2 levels. So you can just take them at face value, but there's something very deep which she is questioning in an apparently simple tale. Or maybe at least I read a lot into it, Katie, that's how I've been seeing them. I find them really quite deep. And I find Katie is really a nature's child, And so, for example, our Parsi colony. It's one of the parts in Mumbai which is so green. It has just an amazing variety of trees. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. So what does Katie do? She promptly writes a book on the trees of a Parsi colony. So it's so easy, you walk and you're wondering what this tree is, and then here you have the book, and there it is. And so she's into all these kinds of bizarre stuff, but then she's a Parsi, so she has to do that. And she's also the founding member of the Save Rani Bagh Trust. Now, this was the trust which spearheaded the movement to prevent Mumbai's botanical gardens from being mauled and the trees being cut down to make for a Singapore type of zoo. And it was a long struggle, but they've been largely successful. And what I find particularly inspiring about Katie is that she has really found her calling in the world of nature as she tells me, at the age of 60. And her first book was published in 2012. And in the ensuing 8 years, that number of one book has grown to 23. So that's, there's so much we all can learn from her. So for all of us who have not yet reached the new 40, I'd just say, as they say, life is calling. What are you waiting for? So over to you, Katie. I would just, I'd just like, if it's possible, I'd just like to share one picture which just shows some of the books that she has written. It's by no means an exhaustive illustration of the books, but I think that it'll just give you an idea. And they're really very well illustrated. So thank you. Over to you, Katie.
Thank you, Alpa. Thank you, Nikhil. And thank you, Delhibird Foundation, for inviting me here. And good evening, everybody. A very warm, warm welcome to all of you. I am really excited to see so many people over here, so many children, all expecting something interesting. Well, um, I am not a hardcore birder, although I'm going to tell you stories about birds. But as Alpa mentioned, yes, I started writing stories 8 to 9 years back. My first book was this was my first book, Birds of Different Feathers. It was my first baby, and yes, I wrote about the birds first, then came insects and mammals and trees and marine life, and it went on. I've never stopped writing since. I found my niche in life so late, but then I hope to write on and on because I just love to write about nature and share it with all of you. And just to tell you a little bit about how I began writing, why did I begin writing? Suddenly I changed my vocation in life and everything was different. Well, um, at the age of about 60, I found my children were well settled in life, in college, they're finished and got a job and everything. I had more time on my hands. And that is when I went around with friends out in the wild for nature trails and discovering very amazing things about the insect or turning over stones and finding out about other creatures, a snake, a lizard, and of course, lots and lots of birds. Birds are the most obvious of all the fauna. We get to see them almost all the time because they fly around, we hear them, and they're very, very fascinating. There are so many interesting things about all of nature's creations, including birds. So I decided to write some stories involving these interesting facts, woven around these facts about birds. And I just wrote the stories, and then some of my friends told me, why don't you publish these stories into a book? One very dear friend in particular, I remember, she even sent me a message. If you publish these stories into a book, I'll be the first person to buy your book. It was really encouraging. And that's what made me decide to publish my stories on birds into a book. And from there, it went on. And I was really very grateful to all the groups I went out with. I used to go with Adesh Shivka, who's a very good birder, and he used to give some very interesting tips about birds, which I will tell you about later. And then, of course, I also joined some courses with Bombay Natural History Society. You children can also join anytime. They have courses on insects, on birds, on on biodiversity. And those were also very interesting. And that is what all together spurred me on. So just to tell you that, I'm going to share a few slides showing you some of the illustrations from this book of mine, Birds of Different Feathers. I'm telling you why I wrote that particular story on that particular bird. So a few slides. I'm not going to tell you about all the stories in this book. You can try and read the stories yourself. And then I'll be telling you some stories also. So, first of all, this is not from my book, by the way, but this is just a picture to tell you how fascinating birds are to all of us. They look like soldiers, don't they? Marching with their big guns. But actually, they are hardcore photographers, birders who are stalking a bird somewhere far away, trying to get a perfect picture. And it's amazing how birds get us crawling on our tummies because they are so mind-blowing. Well, now this is an illustration from one of my stories. It's about a bird called the white eye. It's got a ring of white around its eye. And do you see the red on its head? That is the red pollen. And I wrote this story because I remember Adesh Shivka mentioning in Birds of Mumbai that these little white eyes have the red vermilion, the sindoor on their foreheads, because they keep sucking nectar from the fire bush flowers, and that is when the pollen gets rubbed against their head and they look really cute with the red vermilion on their head. And I wrote a story about that. And then here, I'm sure you can make out which bird this is. It's the buyer weaver bird. Now, we all know that the male buyer weaver birds are very, very skillful at weaving their own nest. They are the ones who weave the nest. They make a start and then they take the approval of the female. And if the female does not approve of the nest, they have to start all over again. So they make several nests before the female finally agrees to the nest. And that's when the female enters into the picture and lays the eggs inside. But this particular buyer bird was very different from the rest. He didn't know how to make his own nest, how to weave the nest. And whatever he did was a very clumsy affair, very, very untidy. So it was never approved and he never got to get a female partner. But he had another talent. He could dance and he could sing. And a lot of the young buyer birds became his fans. But he was very sad because he never got to get a female partner. But finally, his fans, the other buyer weaver birds who used to take tuitions from him in dancing and singing, they built a perfect nest for him so that he could finally get his lady love. So that is part of the story. Then over here, some of you must be knowing, this is a hornbill, a Malabar pied hornbill. The hornbill has a very interesting nesting behavior. The female enters a hollow of a tree. That's her nest. And she seals herself up with her own excreta and mud, leaving only a tiny slit so that her beak can come out. And then the male hornbill, those weeks that the female is inside the hollow, the male hornbill flies up and down, feeding the female through the slit. And when the eggs of the female hatch inside the hollow, the chicks are also fed in this similar manner. So I'll be reading to you a skit about this hornbill. In my book, it's not only stories, there are a few poems, there are skits, and of course, majorly stories. So more about that when I tell you. And here, did you know that certain animals in the forest, like the tiger and the crocodile, they have their own dentists. And the birds are the dentists. A tree pie, a particular bird called the tree pie, is a dentist for the tiger. And there is this lapwing which acts as a dentist for the crocodile. Why do they need dentists? Because they eat meat, they eat other prey. And sometimes scraps of meat or bone splinters get stuck into their teeth and there's no one to pull them out except the little birds who go hop into their mouth and peck it out. So you will hear about this later when I read the poem of the crocodile who had a lot of pain because of some bone splinter which had got caught into his teeth. This is an interesting bird. This is the shrike. All shrikes have this black band across their eyes. And did you know shrikes are called butcher birds? They're called butcher birds because they are carnivorous and they feed on dragonflies, caterpillars, lizards, all of those. They collect them, hunt for them. They collect more than they need to satisfy their immediate hunger. And what do they do with the rest? They hang them on the spines of these trees. So they particularly look for trees with spines. They hang up the rest of the dragonfly or the butterfly or caterpillar, and it looks like a butcher's shop. So this is it's like a ready larder for the bird. Whenever it's hungry, it can eat off the spine. But that is why the shrike is also called a butcher bird. I will read that story to you later. And here, do you recognize this bird, anybody? It's the female quail. And as you know, we can hear the quail all over the place. She and all quails actually are cuckoo birds. And like all cuckoo birds, they do not know how to make their own nests. So they cunningly look for ready-made nests built by other birds. And very trickily, what they do is they exchange their own egg with that of the egg of the nest owner. So while they're in the air, they quickly toss away one of the eggs, which is already inside, and lay their own egg inside. So when the actual owner of the nest comes along, she continues to incubate the eggs, and she will even raise the young quail when it hatches until finally it calls out and then gives away its identity. So that's for the slides. And are you all ready? I will start reading some of my stories to you. Okay? I think I shall begin reading about the birds of different feathers, about the shrike bird. All right, so here goes. Ha! This must be it. The thorny tree, soliloquized the rufous-backed shrike, surveying the spiny branches of the arson tree, and his eyes shone out of the black bands that ran on both sides of his head. I must say that estate agent, the bee eater, took me for a ride, charging me 40 insects and 4 lizards for a mediocre place like this. You know who's an estate agent? He's a person who helps you find a house. So the shrike wanted a tree like a house, and the estate agent was another bird, the bee eater. So the bee eater got him this house, but he was not too satisfied with it. This is sheer highway robbery, but I suppose some home is better than no home. Beggars can't be choosers, he muttered resignedly. The rufous-backed shrike took his bags and settled in a nook amongst the branches of the arson tree. He unpacked and impaled the contents, lizards, butterflies, dragonflies, onto the spines, as though he was proudly displaying some trophies. Suddenly, what happened? There was a flutter of feathers and a lot of chirping and cheeping. The shrike looked up and was shocked to see hundreds of birds jostling about in the surrounding area, each one trying to make himself or herself heard above the rest. The cackle and din was just unbearable. Little did this carnivorous bird realize that he had taken up residence in an area where the other birds were strictly herbivores. They were vegetarians, and that they greatly resented the sight of the little invertebrates being butchered in that manner on the spines of the tree. Naturally, the vegetarians can't bear the sight of all the dead lizards and geckos and other creatures impaled on the spines. Then came their leader, the wise Hornbill. His dignified presence was enough to silence everyone. What's going on? The wise one inquired. We have a newcomer in our midst, a flesh-eating bird, one of them ventured. How can we tolerate him? For years we have been a vegetarian colony. The Hornbill took his time, mulling upon this new problem. He said. The furious birds lost their patience. Let's kill him. He's a butcher bird, cried out one of them. Let's show him how it is to butcher others, proclaimed another one. The poor shrike, it shuddered at this proposition. He thought it wise to make good his escape from this mob, never mind the high price he had paid the estate agent. But to his horror, in a flash, the furious birds were flying towards him like one big stormy thundercloud. The Hornbill tried to stop them, but they wouldn't pay any heed. Oh Lord, save me, the shrike uttered his last prayers. As if in answer, he got a brainwave, he got an idea. Taking one of the impaled lizards, he smeared himself with its blood. He put the blood all over himself The mob, all staunch vegetarians, couldn't stand it. They found the sight of blood most revolting. They retreated as fast as they had approached, disgusted and shaken to the core. The wise Hornbill, who was waiting for their return, scolded them. How can you be so foolish? If the shrike did not eat insects and keep their number under control, this place would would one minute did not I'm sorry, I've lost my line. Did not keep them under control, this place would be teeming with them, and they would eat up all the vegetation. There would be no food left for you birds. You should welcome him to our neighborhood, as his presence will help to keep the web of life intact. It is because of the shrike who was eating other insects that the number of insects were under control. Otherwise, what would happen? The insects would eat up all the plants, the leaves. There would be no vegetation for the vegetarian birds to eat. The flock realized their folly and apologized. They had learned the lesson of balance in nature and appreciated the shrike's presence. From that day on, the shrike was able to live in harmony with the birds of other feathers. He continued to butcher insects and reptiles as that was his main diet. And the vegetarians not only tolerated this, but extended their warm friendship to him. It was a classic example of birds of different feathers under one cover. If birds of different feathers could not stand the company of each other, how would they strike a balance in nature? So that's the story. I hope you all liked it. Anyone would like to give a thumbs up? Yes, thank you, thank you. Okay, want another one? Another story? Yes? Okay. This is about the hornbill, the slide of which I showed you. It's a skit. So it is about a male and female hornbill getting ready. The female enters the hollow, her nest, and she lays the eggs inside, she raises the chicks inside until they are old enough and can manage to defend themselves while the female could go out a bit with the male. So this is how it begins. So there's some surprise at the end. Listen carefully to what's going to come. The scene, it's a mixed deciduous forest of central India. A male Malabar-pied hornbill alights with several berries in its large yellow bill onto a branch just outside a hollow in a pongam tree, which has been sealed up completely but for a slit. He calls out to his lady love who is inside, reminding their family of 3 chicks. Male hornbill. Hello, dearest. Pick. I am back with some food. Pick. And how are our little ones doing? Female hornbill scolding the male. Where have you been for so long? Your babies are crying for food. Can you not hear them? Male hornbill sheepishly. I could not resist stopping by a mahua tree, which was in full bloom. I stuffed myself with those delicious mahua flowers, which were yummy yum. You wouldn't grudge me that, dearest, would you? Female hornbill. No, but they seem to have intoxicated you. You know, the mahua flowers have this strange property. All the animals love to eat, and then they get drunk on it. They get intoxicated. So that's what had happened to the male hornbill. Now pass on the goods, said the female, and I will feed the nutrients. I will put it into our young ones' eternally wide open beaks. The male hornbill lovingly passes the berries into his lady love's beak through the slit in the door, and she feeds some to her babies. Female hornbill gazing adoringly through the slit at her husband. Through the slit, she's looking out at her husband. Dearest, you look quite worn out. You have been dutifully feeding me these past 3 weeks. It's high time I came out of my confinement and joined you in collecting fruits for our babies. In fact, you look quite comical now that you have thinned down. Your cask looks disproportionately large on your skinny body. You know, the cask is the horn-like structure on the beak of the hornbill. So because he had become so thin, it looked so large on his body. Male hornbill. But dear, how can you come out without your lovely feathers? You had plucked them off to make enough room for yourself and the kids inside. Remember? The female actually removes her feathers so that there is enough room for herself and for her eggs or the chicks. Female hornbill. Aha, but now I have grown new feathers. Come on, help me widen the opening in the sealed door. Male hornbill. It's only mud in your excreta. I can easily do it myself. He taps the sealed door gently and makes the opening just large enough for his wife to come out. Female hornbill looking all around. Oh, I haven't been in broad daylight for such a long time. The sun's glare is too bright for my eyes. Male hornbill, dearest, you are looking ravishing in your brand new costume of black and white feathers. But are you sure the babies will be safe while we are away? Because they want to go away, no, for a little while. Female hornbill, don't you worry. Mama has taught the brood how to take care of itself against enemies. Come on, kids, give Papa a demonstration. So the kids, the little babies, show their father hornbill how they can take care of themselves in case an enemy comes along. So what do you think they did? The 3 chicks turns their back to the opening in their home and called out in chorus, all 3 chicks, 1, 2, 3, and shoot, bullseye. Male hornbill, hey, you have squirted me with your poop. Haven't you worn your nappies? What do you think they did? They squirted their own poop onto the male hornbill. Exactly. Perfect marksmanship. Female hornbill giggling. Hee hee. That's the idea. They are potty trained and they will never mess up their nest. And they can shoot their poop very accurately on any enemy. So it serves a dual purpose. They keep their nest clean. They never do their potty inside. And they can shoot it perfectly if any enemy comes along on the face of the enemy. So the male hornbill, a unique and charming method of self-defense indeed. I am proud of my family. Come dear, you need a break. Let's go to the mahova tree. After bidding a noisy, raucous farewell to the young ones and flapping the wings noisily, they flew off together, very much in love. That's the story. Did y'all like it? Yes or no? Yes. I see some people putting their thumbs up. Okay, so didn't you learn something from this? How a hornbill, female hornbill takes care of her young ones, how she teaches them, how she potty trains them and teaches them to live independent lives and fight with any enemies with their poop, right? Okay. I will, as I had told you earlier, I will now read the poem about the crocodile who had got a meaty scrap stuck in his teeth. So as I told you, the lapwing is the dentist of the crocodile, and the tree pie, another bird, is the dentist for the tiger. But it so happened that the lapwing was very clever. When the crocodile moaned and groaned and said that he had a toothache, the lapwing did not enter the crocodile's mouth, knowing very well once she pulled out the bone splinter, What would the crocodile do? Snap, eat up the lapwing. So she avoided it. But the tree pie came along and felt sorry for the crocodile and decided to enter the crocodile's mouth. Even as the lapwing said, no, no, don't. And then to distract the tree pie's attention, the lapwing performed her act. You know, some birds, like the lapwing, can actually pretend. They can act as though they have injured one of their wings. And then they fly with one wing limply falling down, and then they nosedive, fall straight down upon a rock and lie as though they are dead. So this actually confuses their predators. So she did that. But then what happened? You will hear from the poem. All right. So it's called a toothy problem because the crocodile had a toothy problem. Are you ready? Ready to listen? Give me a thumbs up. Come on, everyone. Yes. Okay. There once was a crocodile who yearned to eat a buffalo, a cow, any wholesome meat. His stomach did growl and rumble aloud, startling the forest creatures with such weird sounds. But the reason he suffered in acute agony was caused by a bone splinter wedged between his teeth. His patience almost ended, and he felt very offended when his dentist, the lapwing, refused to clean his teeth. For the wise feathered biped, that is the lapwing, the bird, knew very well once her job ended, she'd no longer be the reptile's friend. The croc wouldn't bother to be very nice. He would simply swallow her in just a trice. But there came along an unwary tree pie, and the unhappy situation he did spy. He consoled the croc and promised to alleviate his mounting misery and nasty toothache. The tiger's personal attendant, the tree pie, was being used to removing meaty scraps from his jaws. So, right into the wide gape of the croc, the trusting bird unhesitatingly hopped. Even as the lapwing warned, please stop. The splinter he pulled out to the croc's great relief. But what happened? Instead of being thankful, he decided to make the bird his meat. The lapwing attempted to distract the nasty croc by nose-diving like a bomber, and upon a rock she plopped. But so ravenously hungry was the predator that nothing at all seemed to within him stir. He was bent on eating up the tree pie. Finally, the lapwing, upon a brainwave hit, the lapwing got an idea. Into the croc's wide open mouth, what did she do? What do you think she did? She pushed a stick. So the crocodile's mouth remained open. It couldn't shut. While the croc sighed and did lament upon his unhappy predicament, the tree pie joyfully made good his escape and thanked profusely the lapwing for his happy fate. As for the crocodile, he managed, of course, to crush the stick with his mighty jaws and found enough food upon which he dined and made merry and learned to live a life sublime. So it's a story in poetry form, and I guess you understood what happened finally? Yes? How many of you liked it? Yeah, thank you, thank you, thank you. So should we come to the end of this? Oh, one more story. How many of you want one more story? I see some grown-ups asking for one more story. Yes, okay. I will tell you the story about the cuckoo bird. Remember I told you the quail cannot make her own nest? So this is the quail, the female quail, kokila, brown with white spots. And Coo, 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 cried Kokila, the female quail. She was on the lookout for a nest to lay her eggs in. It had to be a ready-made nest, and to make a nest of her own was unknown to her, as it had been unknown to her grandparents, her parents, and all her predecessors. But she flapped her wings and flew over the treetops of Rani Bagh. You know, Rani Bagh is a big, big zoo in Mumbai where there are lots of trees. And it was the nesting season. So there were lots of nests. Which one should I choose to lay my precious egg in? Thought Kokila. She knew it didn't matter if the nest was already occupied by some other eggs, because she knew all the tricks of the trade, how to remove and toss away the egg of the true owner and exchange it with her own egg. Swaying from the branches of a bottle brush tree, she came upon a very flimsy, miserable looking nest of a sunbird. This won't do, thought Kokila. How will this flimsy little nest bear the weight of my egg? It's large and heavy. So she flew on, and suddenly a golden oriole flew out of his pendulous nest looking for food. Kokila inspected the nest. No, not possible for me to lay my egg in and exchange it with that of the golden oriole. So she flew on. She came across a cup-shaped nest of a bulbul. That was rejected too, not good enough. But now the egg was on its way out. So, coo, coo, Kokila cried on and on, getting desperate, frustrated. She had to find the right kind of nest. At last, she found what she wanted, a platform of twigs. It was the nest of a jungle crow. And Kali, the female jet black crow, was sitting on the nest incubating her eggs with a dreamy look in her eyes. Kokila alighted on a branch nearby, waiting for Kali to fly away so that she could perform her trick of laying her egg inside. But Kali just wouldn't budge. Kokila waited and waited. Oh no, when will she go? At last, Kali's attention was drawn by some dragonflies flying in the air. They were performing all kinds of aerobics, hovering about, flying backwards, forwards. But for Kali, they meant a delicious meal because she could eat up all the dragonflies. So off she flew, and quick as lightning, Kokila targeted the house of twigs. Flapping her wings while still in the air, she scooped up one of Kali's eggs, tossed it away, and in exchange, laid her own egg. This was performed in a matter of seconds while she was still in the air. She hadn't even alighted. Goodbye, my babe. Take care, were Kokila's last words to her egg. And with that, she flew away. She was now free. All her parental duties were over. She knew very well that once Kali returned, Kali would not make out the difference between her egg and those of her own, because they all looked identical. And Kali would look after her young one when he hatched. So off Kokila went to the other trees, to the fruiting trees, to meet other friends and meet more male quails and have a great time. True enough, when Kali returned, she didn't see anything different, and she continued to incubate the eggs. One fine morning, by and by, all 4 eggs hatched one by one. The first one to hatch was that of Hoshiar, Kokila's young one. But the other 3 soon cracked and opened too. And of course, they all looked identical. And now Kali's duties began. She had to fly back and forth all day long, getting food for the little chicks. They had their eyes shut, but their mouths, the beaks were eternally open, signaling to their mother their hunger. Kali didn't mind doing all this work. In fact, she kept flying up and down, getting caterpillars, butterflies, even scraps of sandwiches from the litter bins near the food stalls of Rani Bagh. But it was never enough. So on and on she flew up and down all day. But she never grudged this duty. She did it with a sound on her beak and a glint in her eyes. Sometimes she would ask Kalia, her husband, to help her get some food. Kalia would agree, but he would take so long because he would get distracted into chasing some squirrels or some owls. And in the meantime, Kali's young ones would raise a big tantrum and Hoshiar would fervently flap his wings. And ultimately, Kali would go herself grumbling and muttering because of the lazy attitude of her husband. Now, for some time after the eggs had hatched, the chicks looked all identical. But as time progressed, Hoshiar, Kokila, the cuckoo's baby, grew faster than than his stepbrothers and sisters, and even his feathers, which appeared, were blacker and shinier. And what was more, Kali considered Hoshiar as her favorite. She would give him the largest morsel of food and she would never scold him like she scolded her other babies for misbehaving. What do you think happened? As a result, the other Kali's chicks resented this partiality. They didn't like this kind of behavior of their mother. And one day, while Kali was away on one of her rounds, Hoshiar, who until now had never uttered a sound, suddenly opened wide his beak and called, "Coo, coo!" Immediately, his stepbrothers and sisters became suspicious. He doesn't sound like us. He's not our brother. We have to tell Mama about it. He's an intruder. So as soon as Kali returned, they pounced upon her. Hoshiar is an intruder. He's not our brother. Chuck him away from our nest. But Kali too had noticed the difference in Hoshiar's appearance, and she was mildly puzzled, but she didn't have the heart to chuck him out. She had nurtured him and taken so much care of him. So she scolded her little chicks. How can you be so heartless? How can we abandon Hoshiar at such a tender age? He can't look after himself. He's so young. Hoshiar is part of our family and he will stay with us. And don't ever come to me again complaining. Kali thought she had settled the matter once and for all. But do you think the little chicks had agreed? No, they were whispering to each other and plotting to do away with Hoshiar in some manner. And one day, when both parents were away, the little chicks, Hoshiar's stepbrothers and sisters, got into the plan of action. They hopped out of their nest onto a neighboring branch and started swinging the nest up and down, up and down. Hoshiar began feeling giddy. No, don't do that, I'll fall. But the chicks swung the nest even harder, harder. 1, 2, 3, we nestlings mutually agree. A happier family we shall be without your company. Heave ho and off you go, they cried. And they swung the nest so much, Hoshiar, who was gripping onto the side of the nest, lost his hold and he began falling and he started screaming, help, help, coo, coo. And did Kali come to his help? Kali was there on a neighboring tree. She heard Hoshiar calling, but she didn't recognize his voice as she had never heard him before. But there was another bird who heard Hoshiar and recognized his voice. And she called out in a very calm manner, Hoshiar, stop panicking. Just flap your wings and fly. Don't you know we birds have the ability to fly? When Hoshiar heard these words, All his fears melted, and he did as he was told. He flapped his wings, and lo and behold, he could fly. The air gave him buoyancy. Yippee, he cried. Suddenly, very jubilantly, I can fly, I can fly. And he flew over all the treetops, and he felt wonderful about it. Wow, I don't have to depend on anyone now for getting food for me. I can lead an independent life. I can get my own food. Yippee! Finally, after he had had his bout of fun flying in the air, he landed at a pond in Rani Bagh. He saw his own reflection in the water, and next to his reflection, there was the reflection of another bird, brown speckled with white. The two of them sat side by side and drank from the pool. After some time, Hoshian looked up and spoke to the other bird. By the way, thank you very much. It was you who saved me, didn't you? Thank you, you gave me a new lease of life. By the way, I am Hoshian the Brave. May I know who you are? And who do you think this bird was? It was Kokila. So she said, I am Kokila, your true mother. And then she explained, we cuckoos do not ever look after our young ones. So when you were still in your egg, I exchanged you with one of Kali's eggs, knowing very well that Kali would look after you. But today, when I heard you calling in distress, I felt a wave of emotion and I thought I had to come to your help. So wingtip to wingtip, mother and son flew away together. A sleepy owl stepped out of a hollow in a nearby champa tree and commented she had the last say. After all, blood is thicker than water. It is the true mother who comes to the help of her young one. So that's the story. Did you all like it? Yes or no? Oh, 2 thumbs up. Very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so I think I've told you enough of stories. If you want more stories, please do look up Amazon and you can order my book, Katie Bagley's book, Birds of Different Feathers, and read the entire book while you're at home. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. So should we go on to the questions? Alpha, everyone?
Thanks so much, Katie. I think we've had a really wonderful session. So I was wondering, Nikhil, is it possible to open up?
Hi, Alpa. I have opened the chat box. So anybody who wants to ask a question, or I can see lots of comments saying, very nice story, ma'am. Everybody's really enjoyed it. Enjoyed all the sessions, and I think that everybody's been listening to them quite enthralled, and I think a few questions are coming in. So Alpa, if you want to just take them over.
Yes, Shaila, 1 second. Before we start the questions, like we've just opened the chat, we can just make the announcements and Katie can ask the question of the day to our viewers, and then we can move on to the Q&A session.
Yes, great.
Sure.
Just 1 second. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Next week also we have a few talks lined up. The first one is on Saturday, the 1st of August. It's a talk on flycatchers of India. And this is being given by Shashank Talvi. So this is going to be a really interesting session on which are the flycatchers found in India, how to identify them, how to differentiate them. And he'll just give us an insight into the world of flycatchers. This is next Saturday at 5 p.m. using the same Zoom meeting ID as today. Moving on, another partner for our talks is Zeiss. And as part of our partnership, we ask one question of the day after every talk. And you can give your answers on this website, delhibirdfoundation.org/contest. And one of the people who gives the correct answer gets an opportunity to win either a Zeiss binocular harness or a Zeiss cleaning kit. Katie, would you like to ask our viewers the question of the day today?
All right. So the question is, listen carefully, is which bird, after laying its egg, paints it a muddy brown color. The original color is not muddy brown, but after laying her egg, she paints it into a muddy brown color. So you can think of the answer and you can give your answer at the link which is given, the site which is given here.
Yes, please don't answer on the chat. That won't be considered a valid answer. Just go to this website. You can take a screenshot or a photograph and then just visit the website and drop in your answer over there. I'll hand it over to Alpa to ask the questions and we can move ahead with the Q&A session.
Thanks so much, Kavi. I think one of the questions which is, being repeatedly asked, Katie, is besides everybody saying how much they've loved your stories and the poem, one of the questions, Katie, which is being asked is that do you illustrate your own stories? And I think I did say you do, but can you tell us a little bit about, how do you illustrate them? And have you always been, an illustrator in your life, or did you develop skills? How do you go about illustrating your books?
See, actually, I have not illustrated Alpa. I have not illustrated all my books. Depending on the publisher. Some publishers have their own in-house illustrators and they insist that the in-house illustrator does it. But a majority of my books I have illustrated. I feel good about doing it because, my heart and soul is in the story. I know exactly what I mean. So I illustrate according to how the story needs to be expressed. So that's why I enjoy doing these illustrations and I find them most fulfilling.
Oh, that's wonderful. But so the question I have for you is, a lot of the young viewers may be thinking that if I also, a lot of them seem to be very inspired by you. So my question to you is that if they want to write a story, how do they go about illustrating? How do they learn to draw? And do you need to have drawing skills or what do you need to have?
Okay, you can practice drawing, and I'm sure you can draw in a number of ways. There are different styles of drawing. You can make cartoon drawings, you can make stick figures, how there are simple ways, but you have to bring out the features of the particular bird you want to show. You can color it according to the color of the feathers of the bird. And of course, you need to refer. Without reference, I wouldn't be able to draw freehand. I need to refer what the vulture looks like or the shrike looks like. And then according to what the shrike is doing in the story, carrying a bag of dragonflies or whatever, I show it.
Great. And do you have any piece of advice to our young viewers, as to how to develop interest? What you told us is that you started at the age of 60. Now, we've seen all of these young faces, all under 12 and under 15. So many of them, you've had pretty much on an average, I've been watching, I've had almost 250 people watching this throughout. So do you have any I won't say advice, but would you have any tips for them on how to develop their love for nature and especially, develop these writing skills and imagination and so on?
Okay, nature, everyone has a love for nature deep within their heart. It is there. But then once you go out, once you look outside your balcony, outside your window, even look at that sparrow, what is it doing? Follow its behavior. There are lots of things to see. There are insects in your pots, maybe, or inside your room. So be observant. You can read up lots of books on nature, read up stories about nature, read up reference books also. And once the lockdown is over, being out, nothing like being out in the field, which I'm sure Alpa will agree because she herself goes out a lot into nature, go into the wild. There is a lot of wild in our urban cities also. You can see a lot of wild in the municipal garden outside, or in our creeks, we can see the flamingos. There are so many things to observe. You just have to stop, stand and stare, and you will get it all.
So well said, Katie. One more question for you. Do you have any other stories which you either, spoken out, and have you been a raconteur? And those stories, are they on YouTube or any other channel? Because there are all of these young children who are saying, where can we read more books? I mean, I know you've told them that these books are available on the Amazon website and they can go to it, but if they just wanted to hear you, because you have your own way of telling stories, so is there a reference site?
Well, there is this organization called the School Library Project. And recently I've started doing videos of storytelling. Every Friday it comes up on Instagram and elsewhere on social media. So I relate a story from one of my books. It's called Forest Friday. So the stories are about animals from the forest. And there are other channels also, like there is one in Pune called Enlightenment Kids. We are planning to do, facts of nature. So I will be I have a book called, which I have recently written. It's called Nature So Bizarre, which has 500 very interesting, very intriguing facts of nature. So I'll be telling about each of those few facts about those on video every Saturday. So, I mean, if you look up my Instagram, you will get to see all these.
So I think that's a lovely message. That I think just do a search for Katie Bagley on Instagram, on YouTube, and there you will have more stories from her. Right? Thanks so much, Katie. It was so wonderful to have you. I think everybody was enthralled with your stories and with your storytelling skills. And your poetry also took us.
Thank you everybody for listening, and thank you, Alpa, and thank you, audience. I really had a remarkable audience. All of you are wonderful.
And we'd like to thank you from Delhibird and our side, all of us, all the audience would really like to thank you, Katie. That was a lovely, lovely session. Everybody's thoroughly enjoyed it. And we look forward to maybe having you a couple of more times. And everyone, please join us for our next sessions next week. Stay safe and looking forward to seeing all of you again. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Shaila. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Katie. Thanks so much.
Bye, all of you. Take care, stay safe, and spend your time, valuable time reading and writing and illustrating. All right, bye.